drawing on God's strength was. And then once we've been here, it hadn't got a whole lot easier, has it? It ain't like we were going to go serve the Lord and it's going to be easy peaches and roses. It's not. And one of the hardest instances we talked about on Sunday with Bobby and Sean is the original band, as Bobby said, was Bobby singing, his dad playing the lead guitar, Billy is Bobby's brother on the drums, and Sean, the brother-in-law, on the bass. And they started just for this. And get a call October on a Wednesday morning, and no major health issues. Boy Scout passed away of a heart attack getting in his truck. And I know that night, getting up here preaching about the hope that we have in Christ and strength, and I don't even know how I did it. It was extremely difficult for me, but I can't imagine how it was for you. You and Sean both, and Billy and everybody had to get back on this stage.
The first time, it was tough. It was really, and it still is. It still gets hard, but you just trust in God and you do it. You just believe He's going to get you through it. Normally He does. He has every time. So.
And there was a lot of times right after that, because it did start out as a family band and kind of built itself into the church band. There was a lot of times after that your heart's just not in it. And like Bobby said, you just got to put your trust and faith in God that you're still doing what you're called to do.
Yeah, there is a lot of nights, like we go to work all day and it's hot right now, and you're out there, you come in Wednesday and go, oh, I'm going to go to church. You know, go play. It's hard. It's hard to do. You're tired and you come up here and you do it. But then when you do it, it changes everything. Normally when I'm tired, I get the most out of it.
When you need your strength the most. The other thing was when I first got here, the church was started and going, and I preached 3 times, and it was about 6 months later before I got to come back. But Kelly had just had a heart attack, and it was your second one, I think. I don't know, you had plenty of them. But I told him on Sunday that if you've ever dealt with Kelly, he seems like he's real blunt and to the point and kind of heartless. He has an excuse. Kelly, what percentage of your heart do you function on?
About 29%.
29% of pump capacity is what Kelly functions on every day. And I'll let Bobby make the same point. You fighting through that, going through that, having every opportunity to say, hey, you know what, guys, I don't need the stress. I've got plenty of issues of my own. I'm going to leave it with you. But I don't think that's ever really crossed your mind. But Bobby made a point on Sunday, and I'll let you make the same point today. That you feel like there's a lot of times God uses Kelly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like Sunday, I think I said, there's probably a lot more men in the church that are healthy-wise. I know they're probably healthier than he is. But their hearts are fine, and they can do the job, but he uses Kelly to do what he does. And Kelly does a good job at it. And he's productive at it. God uses him to get more people in that water trough, through the aerobics and the practice stuff we do. And being a leader in the church the way he is. It's just awesome to see what he's done through Kelly that way. He always does it. All through the Bible, there's stories, one after another, of men that are, that'd be the last person you pick, and that's who he uses.
Go ahead.
I would like to say, though, there have been times when the 3 of us were elders that maybe Bobby, myself, and you didn't agree on anything. And he would use Kelly to bring that words of wisdom, knowing that Kelly's weak, and that we could all jump on him if he didn't agree with it.
Knowing that we could take it.
Right.
The next thing I want to talk about, we didn't do this on Sunday, I hope you guys have seen that we're not glorifying these 3 men. This church wouldn't be here had it not been for them and the heart and passion that God put in them. We're not glorifying them. But I want you to see this. It's all throughout this ministry that is what you see today as Denton County Cowboy Church, if you're just a Wednesday night person and you don't come on Sunday, you miss the blessing. You need to come one Sunday to see that it's standing room only in here, in a building that we thought would last 5 years, that we would never fill up. That every week we pack chairs in here, as many chairs as we have. And it's not because we're great, it's because of Denton County Cowboy Church and the vision that they've had, and they've allowed God's strength. Because as you can say, and I said them before you, and I'm not degrading them in any means, and I'm not joking, so don't laugh, but they're not professionals. I wasn't a professional when I got here, and I'm still not today. But what we've done and what they do is solely relying on God's strength.
Yeah, I mean, if we were doing it on our own, we'd be in a 40 by 60 building, I think, right now. That's what we had drawn up, the first building we was going to build. It was a 40 by 60, and we built, I think, Kelly Locks was the one that said, hey, I'm going to put a little more trust in God and let Him do His job, and don't worry about it. And we need a bigger building right now.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Is it's not us. I mean, honestly, it's everybody that's sitting here. We each have a role to play, and it's just a matter of having the courage to step up, and when it's your time, when God calls you, just take that first step. That's all He's asking. That's the strength that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Is to make that first step.
I still got preaching.
Oh.
Still playing.
But it calls us in our childlike faith, We don't have to be geniuses or nothing. It's just ants. Just come to Him and pray, and He'll lead you. He'll make you pass straight.
I know for me, though, there's still been times where it's just like those guys in the Bible. You think, okay, God, I'm trusting you. And then things are going good. And then you go, oh, okay, I can do this on my own now. And then you fall down and then you turn back. You go over that.
It's just like
so getting up and down, yeah.
The last thing I want to do, just to share a blessing with everybody here, share with me, not the reason you're still here, but one of the biggest blessings you've had since you've been here. My blessing since I came here 3 years ago is to watch people when they come that didn't care a whole lot. They came so their wife would put you in the room, found a home, and began to be obedient to God, and to see lives transformed. There's some of you I'd like to see a little more in, but honestly, as a young man, I feel deeply humbled by the fact that God uses me in spite of all the other more talented, more capable, seminary-trained, professional guys to reach people, but to watch their lives change in front of me. And one man, he's not here anymore, but was an older man, and I counted him as a wise man. And the night I baptized him, when I visited with him about baptism, he looked me in the eye with tears in his eyes. I mean, a guy older than me, more money than I'll ever make. And he said, I owe you my life. Yeah, that's funny. But I never thought I would have that impact on anybody. That's been the biggest blessing to me, is times like that.
Yeah, what Cowboy Church is, what I like the most, is Cowboy Church is what you are every day. You get up and that's who you are. You don't try to get up on Sunday and change your clothes. And that's who you're the same on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Every day it's the same. And I really like that about being able to see people in the community, and that's who they are in church, who they are outside church. And seeing people change, adults, you don't see that in traditional churches, that people that grow up in church, normally God changes them at a young age, and a lot of people in Calvary Church, if there hadn't been, He changes them at an older age. It's people that you would, statistically, you write off. I mean, if you go by church statistics, they get wrote off. Mm-hmm. They're the high percentage that concentrate on this group because this is who the focus. And if you can get some of those higher numbers, well, good for you. But the Cowboy Church is flip-flop that, and our percentages are unreachable.
Yep. The TFCC puts out a deal. We're part of the Baptist General Convention of Texas. We represent 1/10 of 1% of the Baptist churches in the state of Texas, and we baptize 10% of the people as Cowboy churches. We represent a small fraction, but we represent a huge in baptisms, and most of those are in adult males. And when you baptize an adult male, most of the time his family follows. And that's an example. Kelly, anything? Biggest blessing?
The people here, the ones that darken the door every day, every week, they come and hadn't been coming. That's a blessing.
Did you not reach anybody else besides your dad and watching him get baptized when you do it again?
Sure.
Sean?
I mean, I'm just echoing what they say. I didn't become a Christian until I was 27 years of age.
Sir.
And I know. And don't laugh, a lot of y'all were out there with me. And so,
They got hair.
you know, that's the whole thing is a lot of these guys that I rodeoed with, that I ran the streets with and stuff like that, you see them here, you know, and there's still that moment where you have that uncomfortable stare off, like, do I recognize them here in church, or, you know, pretend that they're not here, like when JD first walked in. And so, but I mean, it's awesome to see those people that, like Bobby said, that traditional church writes off. I mean, they're the backbone of this church. They're the ones growing it by leaps and bounds. And so, I mean, honestly, every time that somebody slips into that water trough, I mean, that's the biggest blessing, is to realize, like Bobby said earlier, that God used some people that, you know, should be used and to help plant His seed and to grow His harvest.
Yep. We could talk all night. If you haven't heard the story, the whole story, it's an awesome story. It's a great story. I hope you've been blessed by it. The whole point was to watch us draw our strength off Him. We got a little bit left to do, so y'all give them a hand. They make their way up the stage. All right. Up next, I want you to meet a guy named Scott Harrison. Scott Harrison is the founder of as I was flooding the stage, a group called Charity Water. I was looking up his background, his research, making sure I had everything right. I heard his story and the other lady's story at a Christian leadership conference I went to, but I'll give you some background on who Scott Harrison is. None of these people we're going to talk about are uber people, great people. It's just ordinary people doing great things, relying on God's strength. And what Scott Harrison was in 2004, he was a party planner in New York City. He was in the midst of the celebrity scene. If you wanted a big party, big companies, they wanted something thrown, they came to him, and he would put together his parties. And this is what he would do. And what he found in 2004 was he was living an empty, miserable life and not finding any happiness or any hope, no matter how many friends he thought he had in the nightclub scene or what it was. So he signs up. He has a moment in his life where he says, okay, what do I want to be? He said, complete opposite of what I am now. And so he says, I do a comparison and say, what looks completely different from what I am now? And so he gives up the whole nightclub scene to sign up for a group called Mercy Ships. And he went with these group of doctors as a photojournalist for 8 months on the west coast of Africa. And he took pictures, and he gave up his penthouse apartment, his huge square footage, his luxury lifestyle for 150 square foot on a ship for 8 months. It's where it was his new home. And he thought he had went from prince to pauper until they landed on the coast of West Africa. And when they hit the coast of West Africa and he saw the poverty that they lived in, he realized that his meals he had every day, the water he had to drink, and the bed he had to sleep in made him more wealthy than a large percentage of any of those that live in our world today. And so what he saw there was an extreme need, an extreme way, a people group that needed help. He saw the 1 billion people that go in our world without water every day. 1 billion people in our world go without water every day. To put a better face on that, 1 in 8 people, 1 in God's 8 created beings, goes without water. 1 in every 8 that you see goes without water. 26,000 kids die every day from preventable disease, whether it be waterborne, not getting the proper vaccines as a young adult. I know that part of the group, the kids that my family helped sponsor, that's part of what they tell you. We feed them, they get vaccinated twice a year. It's like their cattle. but it's the best health care that they have. It's their best shot they have. And so they give them vaccinations twice a year. And so what Scott saw for those 8 months changed his life drastically, and he wanted to do something different. He saw all the needs, and he made a list of what can I do to help. They need food, yes. They need vaccines, yes. They need health care, just somebody to take care of them when they do get sick, on top of the vaccines. But in the list that he made, the one thing he thought would make the biggest impact in their life was water. Because with clean water, you stop a lot of the disease that they get, the dehydration that comes from drinking the nasty water that they were drinking, and the diarrhea and the vomiting, and all of that came from drinking the contaminated water that they would spend 8 hours a day walking to get, 4 hours to, 4 hours back, just to get a 30-gallon pail of water every day. And so Scott Harrison decided he was going to do something about it, and that is what started as Charity Water. And if you flip to the next slide, what Scott Harrison has done since 2006, when Charity Water really took off, to today, to April, is he's produced 71 projects in clinics and hospitals. Where water is needed most to take care of those, he's drilled wells by 71 clinics and hospitals. On top of that, he's drilled 384 projects in schools. And the reason he drills the water well in school is if the family doesn't have water, they get the kid in the morning and they send him out with mom to go get water that day. And he doesn't have time to go to school, he doesn't have time for an education, but he's gone to get water for the family. And if you drill a water well out of school, where are they going to send that kid every day? They'll send him to school as long as he comes home with clean water. And so that's why it is important to him to drill these water wells in schools. And then he's drilled 3,507 projects in different communities. It says there's been 3,962 water projects funded in almost 5 years. Charity Water has raised $48 million and funded 3,962 water projects in 5 years. That sounds amazing. Scott was a smart man. He knew how to promote. He knew how to sell what he did. But Scott knew his faith was drawn from God. He needed his strength from Jesus Christ. And what he had experienced in the other world, he thought, I can apply to this world. He saw people every week give $16 over and over and over for alcohol, for different fruit drinks or whatever it is. They would pay big money for them and all of that. So what he began to do was start having parties and selling $20 water bottles. If they'll get $16 for a useless drink of alcohol that they won't have tomorrow, they'll get $20 for a water bottle that will go to a cost to help drill these wells. And so that began what is Charity Water. That was his biggest fundraiser. I mean, it was his money maker. Had him in all kinds of places, all kinds of areas. And one of the struggles that he had where he had to solely rely on God's strength was when Scott Harrison, the founder of Charity Water, saw the effects of bottled water on our environment. Somebody made him aware of what plastic does and all the bottled waters and the thousands and thousands of junk piles there are out there. And he had a tough decision. He, in a nonprofit world, decided to can his biggest income earner. The biggest thing that brought him income, he had to quit because it wasn't good for our environment. And what he saw then was when he was upfront and honest with his people, and he relied on God to get him through, he saw a resurgence in new and innovative ways that people came to him on how to raise funds to drill these wells. The other thing that he struggles with is he is a 100% goes to Charity Water. None of its employees. What you give goes straight to dig wells. And so how does he pay his employees? He has a big company, obviously now. He's got 10, 15 people on the payroll full time. You have to explicitly designate your giving to go to staffing. If you don't go to staffing, designate to give to staffing, it all goes to drill water. So nobody can say that my money's not going where it's supposed to go, or 95% of it's getting used for this. 100% of what you give goes to drilling water wells unless you specifically designate it. There were times he had millions of dollars in the bank to drill water wells and couldn't pay his people. He prayed about it and just fought it through and figured it out. And he's got awesome stories of how God was his strength in his deepest time of need. Scott Harrison wasn't a great man. He'll tell you that in 2004 he was living a horrible lifestyle. The last thing we'll talk about Scott Harrison is you can go online and his website is awesome. And when you give, they have live feed of them drilling wells overseas. He was having a special anniversary, drilling a well in an area there's not water for so many miles, and we're going to drill a well here. Everybody tune in live. Everybody that's ever given to charity water, he sent out this broadcast email. It was a big promotion, big event, and what happens? No water. Drilled for 12 hours that day and never hit water. And he thought that would be his biggest failure. He thought, I'm done. All these wells that we've drilled, now all these people have seen me fail, they won't get their money. And what he thought was going to be a failure, people saw an extreme need at that point. He said they gave like they never gave before because they wanted to guarantee those people had water. And what Scott Harrison saw as a failure, he stepped back and allowed God's strength to see it as one of his greatest defining moments. And still to this day, when you give, and you give your money, whether it's $20 or if you give a person so much water for so many years, 20 years, or whatever it is, when you give your money, his company can tell you what water well your money went to drill towards, what water well, what community you impacted, what people you can pray for. That's awesome. And that's being upfront with the public. Up next is a lady named Christine Kane, and we're going to talk fast about Christine and her ministry. Christine Kane, if you've never heard her, she's an Australian. Hillsong Church, if you've never heard of that, it's a big church in Australia. If you've ever listened to Christian radio, just regular Christian radio, they have a lot of songs on Christian radio. She was just a member there. She's actually an ordained minister now. Her and her husband travel around and have Empower Ministries, and they go and they speak, and she was just she's a phenomenal speaker. She's a firecracker. You think my ADD is bad and I talk fast, y'all listen to her. What she did was she started the A21 campaign. And what it is go to the next slide. She saw something in her travels that she never had been made aware of. We thought slavery had been abolished. We don't deal with it in the United States anymore. We thought that it wasn't an issue. But today there are more slaves in our world than ever before. There are 27 million slaves in our world today. That's more now than there ever have been. And over 1.4 million of those are in the sex trafficking industry. And so what she saw was that human trafficking is the second largest global organized crime today, generating approximately $31.6 billion each year. 27 billion of that comes from sex trafficking, not just human trafficking. And so she saw that, she saw that the countless number of victims, and you go on to the next slide, it says that over 25% of sex trafficked victims are trafficked from Southern and Eastern Europe, an area that she was made aware of. Specifically, they would get them in Europe and they funnel them to Greece. Greece is like this big wheel, and that's why her ministry ended up there. That's where most of them end up, and these are just normal ladies that get trapped, get caught, get stolen, get abused, and taken, and are sold into this industry and forced into this industry. And so 90% of the victims trafficked in Europe, they end up in the sex industry, and tragically, only 1 to 2% of the victims are rescued, and only 1 in 100,000 Europeans involved in trafficking are ever convicted. That's something we'd like to stick our head in the sand and totally ignore and not focus on and say, man, I'm glad that's over there, not here. That's something we don't have to deal with. But God didn't call us to worry about our people here. He told us to worry about all His creation. And she began to be burdened. And what Christine Kane realized was, I've got to do something. She is one lady. So what does she do? She begins the A21 campaign, and that is acting in the 21st century. That is getting off her hind end and doing something in the 21st century. She would like to abolish slavery in the 21st century. That is her goal, and that is why it's the A21 campaign. How is Christine Kane going to do that? She is first and foremost going to prevent people from being trafficked. her company and her ministry goes into schools and teaches these young ladies what these traffickers do, how these people suck them in, how they end up getting abducted and taken away from their families. And they make these girls aware. There's more than one story on her website of girls that went for job interviews from outside the country. The people they were supposed to interview with, they hand their ID over to prove their identity for the job interview, and they get taken, raped, and they never are seen again. The bulk of them. And so they go into these schools and they teach these girls, hey, this is what they're doing. This is how this happens. They do a preventative maintenance on that. The second is they protect and support those who have been trafficked. They get all that they can out of the industry. Believe it or not, as we'll see here in a minute, the government, with it being a $27 billion industry, is not real big. It's like stopping drugs. They really don't care about it because it's got so much money behind it. And so trying to get the government's help, local law enforcement, you don't think there's some crooked cops involved in all that? They have trouble with local law enforcement, and so they get all they can out of the deal, out of the ministry. They teach them a trade. I have a bag in my office that's made by a woman who was sexually in the sex trafficking industry, and she was rescued out of it, and that's what they do. They get them in here, and they get them in this area. They love them, they minister to them, they teach them a trade, they begin making these bags, and they sell these bags all over the world. And it's what they do. That is part of the protect. They prosecute. They prosecute traffickers and strengthen the legal response on trafficking. It is extremely hard, especially in Greece. They've convicted one man for sure, and I don't know how many since I heard it taught class, but it's extremely difficult to get the government to prosecute these human traffickers. And then the last thing they do is they partner with law enforcement. They find the good guys, the ones that do want to do what's right, and serve as community members, and they're doing their best to get a front on trafficking. Because those that are involved in it it's ridiculous. But she is one lady with one goal. She's had extreme struggles with local government. It would be nice to say, I'm going to come in here, I would like to start a ministry. We're going to start getting these girls out of these houses. We're going to get these girls out of these brothels. And video camera, live feed, getting in there. And that's where they are. And it's a ministry. But Christine Kane will tell you in one of the first videos you watch on our website, if I say one woman, it's worth it. One person, it's worth it. Y'all are getting restless. It's been a long night. Last one we got. Our very own Audra Swofford, Ponder, Texas. She's just like you and me. She was burdened by God to go to Asia. She spent 3 years in Asia learning a language of a people group that did not have the gospel in their language. And what she did, she went as a student of the language to learn the language, and she would translate the gospel into their language so that they could hear the gospel for the very first time. She spent 3 years over there doing that. She gave up all the comforts of beautiful Ponder, Texas, to live in what you see here. The bottom right is the bunk bed she shared in the little room that she lived in. Her bed was 4 inches too short, she said. They're short over there. I don't need any emails on that. It was her observation, not mine. But bed was 4 inches too short. She gave up air-conditioned, heated house, carpeted room, a bed. Y'all still fed her, right, Kelly? She still got to eat. And she gave all that up to go live in that house for 3 years to serve overseas. And she still continues to serve the Lord today. She comes back, goes to seminary. God calls her somewhere else. She spent all summer in Georgia at camp. And it's amazing when you talk to her to hear her story. When you ask Audra Swofford, is there ever a time you wanted to come home? She'll laugh and say, is there ever a time anybody in the ministry doesn't want to quit? And then she says, yeah. There were nights I cried my eyes out, wanted my family, wanted the comforts of home, and then in the end, what got me through was I realized God had called me here, and I wasn't relying on Him to get me through. And she says that if it hadn't been for her reliance on His strength, she would have never been able to stay there the amount of time she did. One last interesting fact about where Audra went in Asia was it was illegal to share the gospel. And when God calls you to do something, He'll give you the strength to do it, whether it's illegal or not. When it comes to sharing His gospel, if He tells you to go, you go. And I don't know, you probably don't get that. You probably don't see that like I see it. but to give up everything, to go somewhere where you can be persecuted, thrown in prison, and give up all that you have, and rely solely on God's strength because He called you to do something great. She's an ordinary, when she's in town, if you ever have a chance to talk to her, she's country. She's a small. They talk slow. I'm just kidding. She went to Asia and they talked real fast over there, and she came home and she said, "Girls are nuts because everybody talks so slow here." But we look at all these examples to get to this last slide here. Philippians 4:13. When you think about it, do you really think that you can do everything God calls you to do? I can do all things through Him who gives me strength. Is that where you draw your strength? Is that your source in your extreme times of trouble? And that question I put at the bottom, or that quote I put at the bottom, is as I was getting ready for this, extremely burdened to going, how am I going to show these people what does this gospel mean? Ordinary people do extraordinary things for God every day. Not because of their strength, but rather they go humbly to God and seek Him for the strength to do what He has called them to do. What has He called you to do? That's my question for the night. What has God given you the strength to do? What ministry has He called you to impact the world around you? What has He given you the strength to do? What have you told God, no, I can't do that, God. I'm not strong enough to do that, God. You have other people out there that will do that. What has He called you to do, and He's given you the strength to do it, but you haven't tapped into it? What are we holding back from God, and what are we not doing for Him? Because what we've seen over and over again, and I hope that you haven't seen that I've tried to glorify any one person, is that we've seen normal, everyday people do things that we wouldn't expect of them because of God and His strength and His calling upon their life. And we all have that calling. What has God given you the strength to do? Don't waste that verse. Don't waste that verse and live a comfortable life and say, I think God called me to have my wife and 2 kids and to show up at church and regular church attendance when Christ died on the cross for the salvation of our souls so that we could love God, so we could have the opportunity to love God. And when you love God, you will begin to serve God. He didn't die so you could be comfortable. He died so you would rely solely on Him and His strength to get you through everything He's called you to do. That's the gospel. And if you've heard it any different way, you come talk to me and I'll tell you the truth. Because God has called us to a mighty work, and we need to rely on His strength to do it. Let's pray. Father God, we come to you right now, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity you give us to see men and women like Audra and Kelly and Bobby and Sean, people that were instrumental, that serve in this church in so many capacities, and they're just ordinary, everyday people. But God, you give us the strength to do what you've called us to do. God, we don't deserve to be part of your plan, but you allow us to be part of it. Lord, I pray that if there's anybody out there who doesn't know you, who has a question about what it means, all of this serving you tonight, all of this relying on your strength is totally foreign to them. God, I pray that you would draw that person to you. They would understand that they can come to you for every need that they have, that you are our strength in our very, very deepest time of need. God, I pray for the believers out there that are struggling right now. Lord, they don't know where the next meal is going to come from, where the next payday is going to come from, how are we going to pay the bills. God, I pray that they would rely on your strength through this medical difficulty, through whatever trial, and God, we would seek your will, and we know that you will get us through whatever happens in this life. If we truly give everything to you, you will give us the strength to get through it. God, I pray that as a church, that we would be more concerned about showing up, that we'd be more concerned than just getting here. That God, we would do what you called us to do. Each and every one of us in our own ministries, in our own opportunity, we're placed in a unique area to impact the world around us. Nobody else sees the exact same people we see, God. Help us to be used by you. Help us to rely on your strength when we feel inadequate to preach the gospel to those around us. When we feel inadequate to say what needs to be said. To step up and stand firm in you when we need to, God. To quit living our lives for ourselves and realize that we're here for you. May we rely on you when we get weak. May you be the strength when we're serving you with all that we are and we don't know where our next breath's going to come from, God. God. It comes from you. May you be our strength. Give us the strength and courage to be that person today. It's all in Jesus' name. Amen.